The story of the band Shocking Blue begins with a young, talented, and notoriously capricious guitarist named Robbie Van Leeuwen. His unique superpower was the uncanny ability to form promising bands, only to abandon them soon after. Over the years, he played in several groups, including Ricochet's, Six Young Riders, and Motion. With Motion, he finally gained recognition and made a decent amount of money, as the band became the first Nutterbeat act to chart successfully. But as soon as the spotlight dimmed and the money dried up, Van Leeuwen walked away, once again, seeking something new. In 1967, in The Hague, he crossed paths with bassist Klaasje van der Wal, drummer Cor van der Beek, and vocalist Fred de Wilde. Together, they formed a boy band and named it Shocking Blue, allegedly inspired by Eric Clapton's track Electric Blue. Thanks to Van Leeuwen's connections and personal funds, the newly formed group managed to record their debut album that same year with the British label Polydor Records. Their early work leaned heavily into the then popular rhythm and blues style. Unfortunately, their first album was a commercial failure. Audiences weren't impressed, and the band faced the real possibility of fading into obscurity. But surprisingly, they didn't fall apart. Instead, Van Leeuwen, despite his mercurial nature, stepped up as a true leader, rallying the group with the now famous words, "Style is nothing. Music is everything." Shocking Blue slowly began to turn things around. In 1968, they released the minor hit Lucy Brown is Back in Town, which reached number 21 on the Dutch Top 40. However, just as things were starting to look up, fate intervened. Fred de Wilde was drafted into the Dutch army, leaving the band without a frontman. It was a devastating blow, and only a miracle could prevent the band's collapse. That miracle came in the form of Mariska Veres. Veres began her musical journey in 1963, singing with the guitar band Les Mystères. In 1964, she recorded an EP with them, featuring Summertime and Someone. Over the next few years, she sang with several other bands, the Bumblebees, the Blue Fighters, Danny and His Favorites, and General 4. By 1966, she was performing with the Motowns, even playing the organ alongside her vocals. Rumor has it that her path to Shocking Blue wasn't entirely accidental. One of the producers from Pink Elephant, the label where Shocking Blue had recently recorded, saw Veres perform with the Bumblebees at a party and instantly fell in love. Wanting to help her career, he introduced her to Van Leeuwen, after first letting the guitarist listen to her solo album, Top Copy. Van Leeuwen was immediately struck by her distinctive voice and charismatic stage presence. He wasted no time inviting her to join the band as Fred de Wilde's replacement. According to Van Leeuwen, as soon as Mariska joined, everything changed. The band's energy reignited and creativity surged. Most importantly, her arrival sparked the inspiration behind their biggest international hit, Venus. The song Venus was released in 1969 and instantly exploded across the global music scene. By January 1970, it had reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the first Dutch song to ever top the American charts. The industry was stunned. How could a band from Little Holland accomplish what many British acts had been chasing for years? But Venus wasn't just a hit. It was an anthem, bold, seductive, and soaked in psychedelic flair, driven by one of the most recognizable guitar riffs of the era. Lyrically, it exuded sexual confidence and raw female power. Robbie Van Leeuwen composed it using the melody from The Banjo Song by Tim Rose and the Big Three, which itself reimagined Stephen Foster's 19th century tune, Oh, Susanna. The opening riff even echoed the iconic energy of The Who's Pinball Wizard. The song was recorded on a 2-track tape recorder at Soundpush Studios in Blaricum, Netherlands, with Van Leeuwen also taking on production duties. A quirky detail: in the original lyrics, the line "Goddess on top of the mountain" was mistakenly written as "Godness." Mariska Veres, still not fluent in English at the time, didn't catch the error and ended up singing it that way on the official recording and in live performances. Later covers corrected the mistake, but the original version remains a charming artifact of its time. As Venus surged through Europe, record labels scrambled to sign Shocking Blue. But only Jerry Ross, head of Colossus Records, succeeded. Ross happened to be in Europe scouting for talent when he heard Venus, and immediately knew he had to sign them. That single deal was so profitable that Ross shut down his studio and retired just a year later, in 1971. Following the Venus phenomenon, Shocking Blue kept the momentum going, releasing a string of notable hits. Most memorably, Love Buzz and Mighty Joe. Love Buzz was built on an exotic sitar-like bass line that pulled listeners into a dreamlike trance. It was hypnotic from the first note, clearly influenced by Indian psychedelia, then fashionable after the Beatles' spiritual journey to India. Van Leeuwen created a soundscape that was sensual and mysterious. Mariska's vocal performance here was mesmerizing. Soft, sultry, and almost spell-like. Unlike the commanding delivery of Venus, her voice in Love Buzz was intimate and alluring, steeped in the obsessive undercurrents of late 60s psychedelia. It was more than just a love song. It was about obsession, infatuation, and longing. That atmosphere of dark desire would later resonate with a new generation when Nirvana covered Love Buzz for their 1989 debut album, Bleach. Injecting it with raw grunge energy, Cobain preserved the structure but added chaos, distortion, and emotional intensity, proving just how ahead of its time Love Buzz really was. Then came Mighty Joe, a track rooted more in classic pop rock with a soulful edge, simpler in rhythm and more accessible. It featured a bright but bittersweet melody, carried by a crisp guitar riff and clean production. Mariska's vocal range shone in this song. Here, she wasn't just embodying a persona, she was singing for real. Her voice held a quiet ache, as if on the verge of tears, yet still full of resilience. Though Mighty Joe didn't become a blockbuster in the US, it gained massive popularity across Europe, especially in the Netherlands and Germany. Today, many critics consider it one of Shocking Blue's most underrated ballads. It's important to note that while many remember Shocking Blue solely for Venus, tracks like Love Buzz and Mighty Joe challenge that one-hit wonder narrative. These songs reveal the band's creative range and Mariska Veres' unmatched ability to shape mood, genre, and emotion with her voice. After the explosive success of the early 70s, Shocking Blue's creative engine, Robbie Van Leeuwen, hit a wall. The pressure to produce hit after hit began to weigh heavily on him. Radio DJs were constantly expecting the next smash single, but with relentless touring schedules, there was simply no time for Van Leeuwen to retreat into the creative space he needed. The solution? To keep the momentum going, the band began including cover songs in their albums, a stopgap that underscored the internal burnout. Despite flashes of brilliance in singles that charted across Europe, none managed to break through internationally the way Venus had. The limited success chipped away at Van Leeuwen's drive, and in 1974, he left the band in search of fresh inspiration. He didn't disappear, far from it. That same year, with his new band Galaxy Lynn, he released Long Hot Summer. Then in 1977, with the synth-forward group Mistral, he returned to the charts with 3 spacey, disco-infused hits: Jamie, Starship 109, and Neon City. Mariska Veres, the voice and face of the band, followed shortly after. She launched a solo career that lasted until 1982, but as the 70s drew to a close, it became clear to all the members that the magic of Venus wasn't something they could replicate. So instead of chasing a fading spotlight, they let the legacy of Shocking Blue live on in the form of reissues and nostalgia-fueled reunions. The first reunion came in 1979 when they recorded the single Louise, a track that, for reasons still unclear, was never released. A year later, they performed live again, delivering classics like Venus and Never Marry a Railroad Man to loyal fans. They made another brief comeback in 1984, releasing The Jury and the Judge, followed by I Am Hanging On to Love in 1986. Their final single, Body and Soul, arrived in 1994. The band might have kept resurfacing with new material if not for the tragic death of drummer Cor van der Beek in 1998. Then, in 2006, Mariska Veres passed away after a battle with cancer. In 2018, bassist Klaasje van der Waal also died, leaving Robbie Van Leeuwen as the last surviving member of the band's classic lineup. Yes, Venus is their crown jewel, but to reduce Shocking Blue to a one-hit wonder is to ignore the depth and daring of their catalog. They were pioneers, fearless, melodic, and electrifying. While they didn't become the next Beatles, Shocking Blue left behind something just as lasting, a raw, untamed sound that still resonates in the hearts of those who grew up in an era of real music, before auto-tune and algorithms took over.